As always, we wish to say thank you for making zsportslounge.com your choice to equal that 1.5 million listeners, and obviously the affiliates to help support that. The military bases, the men and women stationed all over this globe, giving what they get. We're going to go all the way out to Trine University, talk to head wrestling coach Dan Callahan. Sir, thank you.
You're welcome.
Coach, I bet you've been in the office probably for 2 to 3 hours going over all the paperwork you have for this season. You've got new faces showing up in freshmen. I'm sure you got underclassmen that want to wrestle at their weight class, and they're asking their opinions. How many different hats do you wear at this time in the morning?
Oh, well, between wrestling and the NCAA compliance, I wear quite a few right now.
I'm not a huge fan of the NCAA. There's more and more of us in the media that have issues because they don't tend to support sports that aren't like football and basketball, to be quite honest with you. And depending on the communities they're in, baseball. Wrestling's one of those items that they give the most, I guess I don't usually cuss, but they give the most trouble to without really helping support the program. I know you have to follow the guidelines to get along, but as far as a fan of the sport, I wish the NCAA would give more money and promote all the hard effort you all put together. I know it's changing, but I'm looking forward to big changes this season.
Well, it is, and I think the NCAA they're caught in between a hard spot. Who brings the money in and who does the public want to watch? And that's not necessarily fair to us as wrestling programs. But on the other hand, it's society. It's a societal thing as much as anything else. So they're caught in a tough spot. Yes, we do have to follow their rules, and sometimes the rules do get a little cumbersome.
Yeah,
but overall, I think the NCAA is starting to recognize us and starting to give us a little more of a hand. I'm not sure it's the NCAA as much times as it is the individual universities that don't look at wrestling as a moneymaker, so why are we going to put any effort into it?
Yeah, and you see programs that have embraced and used the wrestling program to help support everything they do academically. It seems wrestlers are the hardest workers. They're usually the hardest academic achievers. A lot of people equate that, well, you can say that about soccer, you can say that about swimming, but in wrestling, you've got marathon matches on the mat. Each day they show up, let alone balancing the academic requirements. Then you have other requirements you have to put forth for the students to do after-hours activities with the community. Wrestlers by far are the best examples of what student-athletes should be.
I have to agree with that, especially at the Division III level. I mean, I think that when you look at what our kids do and how much effort they put forth, I think wrestlers are a great example. Unfortunately, so many times we get judged by the few that aren't, and I think that happens in many cases in all sports. When you watch ESPN, you rarely see the good story about any athlete. It's always the negative that seems to pop up, and again, it's unfortunate. I think that if you look at most wrestling programs, I agree with you that you'll find that the wrestlers are the hardest working and most dedicated towards what they're supposed to be there for.
Yeah, and the further that is that there's so many positive stories in sports that are gripping. Every once in a while, ESPN will publish a football story like the one out of Pennsylvania with WCB West, which is a tearjerker. It really is. But then the other ones is they're promoting the idiots who really aren't contributing to their team, but they're the biggest mouth on the team. It sort of draws you away from following the sport. Well, right now at your program, you've got academic All-Americans, and you've got guys that are listed that are flat-out studs that have the opportunity to go to these big tournaments. Who are those guys? I know I can read off their names, but you know them by heart.
Well, actually, it's a very interesting year. We have had, and our program's only 3 years old, or 4 years old. We finished our fourth year of competition last year. And, we've got Nick Krause, who are going to be a 184, 197. We're not sure yet. That weight class happens to be so stinking loaded that we're not sure who's going where yet. But Nick Krause is a potential All-American. Another one is Alex Fleet. He'll be whoever doesn't go 84, Alex or Nick. One of them will go 97. One of them will go 84 this year. He's potentially an All-American. We've got Thomas Pompey returning after a good season last year at 141. And then we've got an incoming freshman named Elias Larson, who was the Illinois State champion last year, who I think potentially could be an All-American. Also at 157, Kyle Long, who was as a freshman last year was runner-up in the regional. So yeah, we're kind of looking forward to a great year this year and getting some of those kids to the NCAAs. You know, being a young program, we haven't broken through yet. We haven't got a kid to the NCAA championships yet. Last year we took second in the regional as a team and didn't get anybody qualified, which you know, I look at that as a positive and a negative. We certainly want to get someone qualified, but everybody on my team that entered the regional last year placed. And that was, you know, that's how we took second as a team. So we've got to take that next step. This is the year that we feel like we've got to go from good to great.
Yeah, I mean, I focus on the academic All-Americans and conference champs that you have. That is so hard to do, especially in wrestling. When you're out there working for 3, sometimes 6 hours on moves, exercise, running, cardiovascular work, then you've got to make sure you keep your strength up by lifting some weights, and then go back to cardio, and then you have to sit down and read books and go online and try to get a 3.2 or better grade point average. It is not an easy road, and you got to be, patted on the back for all the hard work your students do to represent your program.
Well, and I am extremely proud. In the 4 years that we've been here as a program, we have 4 academic All-Americans. You know, and I think but those two, actually, the guys that have been academic All-Americans graduated last year. You know, I go back to Nick Krause. Nick Krause is an education major. You know, really, one of the biggest things we're trying to do right now is just find the correct time to practice because of his and other kids' class schedules. You know, we're practicing some nights. We don't practice until 6 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night so that we can get those guys out of, you know, so they don't have to miss class to come to practice, which obviously in Division III you can't miss class to come to practice, but it's still, that's probably, and then after practice these guys have to go home and do their studies, you know, and it is tough, and these, you know, I use Nick and Alex and Thomas, all 3 of those as fine examples. I mean, last year we had 4 wrestlers who maintained a 3.8 or better in the program, so, you know, that's kind of what, like you're talking about, these kids really do sacrifice. They give up a lot to be both academically sound and solid wrestlers too.
Yeah, when you think about it, you don't equate it to football. A lot of people who follow wrestling are just now, you know, showing signs of being intrigued by this thing called wrestling that's been around for over 100 years in this country and the college campuses. This world of MMA has really brought it full circle. If we look at the UFC, the largest payday for any wrestler, it is chock full of D2 All-Americans. There's even some D3s, such as Elmhurst's assistant coach, Ricardo Lamas, is a very successful MMA fighter as well as a coach. The visibility has not been higher, and we're seeing a slight tremor of changes, even though Don Alia had lost his program at Carson Newman, which is sad, and Slippery Rock a couple years before. There are still some movements in the wrestling communities. We know at the grade school and elementary level, it's more positive. More kids are going out for it. Guys that are traditional, you know, kickboxers in grade school are now looking at this thing called wrestling to find out more about it. Are you seeing any changes? I know you've been there 4 years, but are you seeing more people intrigued and trying to find out more about your wrestling program?
Well, I'm not sure that there's a direct correlation between the MMA and what you're talking about. Our program being so young, I'm seeing a lot more people interested in our program, but I think it has to do with the program's success as much as with the MMA. MMA is kind of to me, is a mixed bag. I appreciate that our wrestlers are finally getting a chance to go out and make some money doing what they love to do. It's a little scary because I think the general public will still see MMA as brutal, and I don't see college wrestling as a brutal sport. So, you know, I'm happy that the MMA is doing well. I'm happy that our wrestlers are getting out there, able to go out and make a living doing something they love. It's still, you know, I'd say in my opinion, the jury's kind of still out on whether it's the best thing for the sport or not. as soon as, if anybody ever, and luckily no one has yet that we know of, dies, but as soon as it dies, college